castle. May 23rd.
3 Catholic officials are seized by a furious Protestant mob and dragged to the high window of the Bohemian chancellery.
70 feet of empty air separates the stone sill from the dry moat below. They fell not into the arms of angels, but onto a soft, steaming heap of refuse.
Here we observe the tragic culmination of opulence and neglect. A stark reminder that even the finest...
They struggle to their feet, smelling of filth, shaken but miraculously alive. A thousand kings, one broken crown.
The Holy Roman Empire is not a nation, but a jagged, confusing mosaic of independent statelets.
A patchwork of Protestant North and Catholic South, held together by rotting parchment and ancient fealty. It is a geopolitical machine, jammed by the friction of absolute belief.
The Habsburgs tighten their grip along the Spanish road, forcing their troops through this volatile corridor to crush the Dutch.
Every border crossing is a tripwire, and every whispered prayer is a declaration of total war. Enter the dark prince of logistics. Albrecht von Wallenstein rises not from royalty, but from the brutal, opportunistic calculus of the mercenary market. He is a man who commands chaotic armies, yet cannot abide the sound of a barking dog or a creaking cart. He orders heavy iron chains drawn across the streets of Prague to silence the city below his window.
For Wallenstein, war is not a crusade. It is a self-sustaining organism that feeds on gold and blood.
He does not move a regiment without first consulting the stars.
He sits in the gloom with Kepler's astrological charts, mapping destinies while his soldiers strip the countryside bare.
He raises a terrifying force of tens of thousands on credit, a massive, silent predator waiting to strike at the Emperor's command.
He sells organized violence to the highest bidder, and business is booming.
A storm breaks from the frozen north.
Gustavus Adolphus lands in Germany not to pillage, but to rewrite the physics of slaughter.
He looks at the Spanish tercio, that massive, lumbering square of pikes, and sees a dinosaur waiting to be extinct. He replaces the brute mass of the block with the lethal precision of the line.
The synchronized steps of the regiment echoed the relentless drumbeat of war. For every volley fired, more ground had to be taken.
His artillery does not bog down in the German mud.
His engineers construct cannons of leather and copper, light enough to be dragged by 2 men, shifting fire as the battle breathes.
The Swedish musketeers drill endlessly, reducing the 40-step reloading chaos to a terrifying, synchronized rhythm.
Wait.
While the Catholics fumble with heavy gear, the Swedes unleash a rolling volley of lead that tears the air apart. It is the birth of the modern military machine, efficient, industrialized, and utterly devastating.
The gates of hell swing open. The Imperial armies breach the walls of Magdeburg,
and the rules of war evaporate in the thick, choking smoke.
The soldiers call it the Magdeburg Wedding, a perverse, mocking union of fire, rape, and the sword. The city is not just conquered, it is erased, its population butchered in a frenzy that shocks even the generals.
As the war drags on, the harvest fails, and the land turns grey. All that remained of the once thriving village was this solitary chimney, standing testament to the destruction.
White mist! Blind chaos!
At Lutzen, the two titans of the age collide in a suffocating fog that hides friend from foe.
The Lion of the North rides into the grey void and does not return.
Strafe, the king's charger, gallops back to the lines, saddle empty, mane stained with blood.
The Protestant champion is dead, stripped naked and buried under a pile of anonymous corpses.
Night falls upon the bloodiest field in Saxony. The battle is over, but the grief has only just begun. Wallenstein survives the battle, but he cannot survive the paranoia of the court. His ambition grows too large, and his stars finally turn against him. Assassins creep into his quarters at Eger, bribing the guards.
There is no grand duel, only a halberd thrust into the chest of an unarmed old man in his nightshirt.
The giants are gone, leaving the war to be fought by smaller, crueler men.
The cross cracks. The fleur-de-lis rises.
The pretense of holy war dissolves as Catholic France enters the fray against Catholic Spain. Cardinal Richelieu, a prince of the church, bankrolls Protestant armies to bleed his Habsburg rivals.
God has left the battlefield now. It is only the state that demands sacrifice.
The conflict becomes a grinder of attrition, dragging on for 13 more years.
Then, at the Battle of Rocroi, the impossible happens.
The French infantry shatters the invincible Spanish tercio, ending a century of dominance.
Richelieu strokes his cats in Paris, watching the map of Europe change colors. The medieval order collapses, replaced by the cynical, modern geometry of power. 30 years. 8 million dead. The diplomats gather in Westphalia to sign the parchment that finally stops the bleeding. They draw borders that will define the modern world, birthing the nation-state from the ashes. But the ink dries on a continent that is a graveyard.
half the population of Germany is gone. Fields have turned back to forests, and villages are haunted by the ghosts of the starved.
This is the original scar of Europe, a wound that will ache for centuries.
For centuries, the black birds have watched from these walls, their cries echoing the sorrows of Bohemia. A sudden move across the board, signaling the inevitable retreat. The shadow of defeat loomed large that night. In the heart of the forge, bathed in fire and sweat, the blade was slowly born. The shadow of Wallenstein loomed large over the Holy Roman Empire. A brilliant commander, perhaps, but what?
The inferno consumed all that was sacred, a symbol of faith, now reduced to ashes and splintered wood.
The symbols of power often outlast the virtue they represent, becoming mere pathways for the creatures of the dark.
The great bell lies silent now, overgrown by the very earth it once commanded.
The shroud of fog concealed the boots of the fallen, a mercy for the living who could not bear witness to the slaughter. The lion, once a symbol of strength, now lay broken and stained in the mud of this forgotten battlefield.
This was the price of the siege, a price paid not in coin, but in the very lifeblood that stained the snows of Leningrad.
They left nothing but shadows and the dust of forgotten lives. The famine claimed them all,